Hello, it's a good evening from
And it's a good evening from him.
Welcome again. Some of you have come back for a second time, but we're joined by people from as far afield as Hong Kong and the USA, with having slightly later time. So welcome to everybody who's joined so far.
Wargaming across the world, Simon.
We are. We've got people in from everywhere now. So we had Australia and Thailand earlier. So we're starting to build something quite interesting. I'm just going to put a brighter light on because it's a bit dark where I'm sitting. Better? You can see me a little bit better now.
Yeah.
Today we are working on the Battle of Magnesia, which is a fantastic battle. We've already had a lot of fun with it early in the day. I have finished one Pacto game, which I shall walk through a little bit, and I'm playing a what-if scenario now. And Simon's got his Maximus gamer to cringe moment, I think. So I was going to recreate a bit of the early Smash, I think, for the benefit of us all. Yeah?
Oh, yes.
What we're going to do is do a little bit of a walk through the background of the battle. Some of you who are joining for the second time, looking for a second serving, are going to get much the same thing. No doubt we'll improvise slightly differently, which we're bound to do. So this is like a jazz band version of doing wargaming. So we will come back to that very shortly. So let me just start us off. For those who weren't involved earlier, I am going to just give you a little update on the Battle of Sabis 57 BC, which we did for the launch. Some of you were there watching that. We had some cracking games on the day. And just to update, other people have been playing it. So Simon Elliott played it twice. It was a 1-1 result between the two sides, to Rome and the Nervi. I played it twice in Pacto, which was 2-0 to the Romans. I actually played one of those games internationally with teams from Thailand and New Zealand, which is rather fun. And Rome won it, but they managed to get Caesar killed with the 9th Legion in the middle of the fight. So that's the end of most of Simon Elliott's book career in one phase.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, no problem. There have actually been 4 of the refights already by players. Abe Nash has done, I think, 3 of those, and I think I've missed one of his. Actually, there might be one more, and that's 2-1-2. There was actually a mutual destruction, which is actually really difficult to achieve in Meg. You have to do that by breaking each other on the same dice roll. So that takes some doing. I've only seen about 2 in the entire life of the game so far. So we have a running score of 5-1-3 in favour of Rome. Please do download the game. It's up on the website. You can take it as it is and play it. It takes a little over an hour. Let's see if we can get to about 30 results, because 30 is a good statistical significant sample. And then we'll have a really good flavour of how it's going. Although it looks like you feel it, which is a scary game for Caesar that on average he manages to weasel his way out of with his life and his troops, but not always. So, moving swiftly on, we're going to a slightly different era. We're going a bit earlier in time now. We're going to Magnesia, 190 BCE. Let me give a little bit of background, and then I'll let Simon just talk briefly about the sources. The original sources don't really exist. We were hoping we'd all find Polybius, which will be a second-hand version, but his version's missing. So we actually have mainly Livy and Appian having third-hand versions of it. But to give a little bit of background, for those who don't know this battle at all, it's Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire facing a Roman army under Lucius Cornelius Scipio, who's brother to Scipio Africanus, the famous Scipio from the Battle of Zama. It was an interesting setup. Both armies actually were rich with advisors. Scipio Africanus had his brother with him, so he had a very good advisor handy there. And actually Hannibal, who'd won in Cannae and in Italy and Trebia, but lost at Zama, was actually with Antiochus in the build-up to the battle. So that's quite interesting in itself. Antiochus had more numbers. Most of the sources would agree with that, but it's quite questionable how good they were. There might be about 50,000 to 30,000. Some of the early ones suggest 70,000 to 30,000. For all sorts of reasons, both could be believable, and I'm sure Simon will expand on that in a minute when he talks on the sources. Antiochus possibly wants to fight on the more open plains because he has many more cavalry and he has many more troops. Although equally, as we go into what those troops were, he possibly didn't mind fighting in a constricted area either. And the Romans basically tempt him into battle on a fairly tight space between 2 rivers. Simon, do you want to talk a little bit about the sources and the Seleucid Empire at this time?
Certainly will. Right. Well, the first thing to bear in mind, Simon, is that when we're dealing with primary sources from the classical world, from the ancient world, it comes with sort of a warning that, you can't take everything for granted. So there's always the issue of how accurate things are. And also, it's very important to realise the paucity of sources from a primary context that we as historians and archaeologists deal with. Certainly, if I was a physicist or a chemist or a biologist, I'd probably laugh at the fact that we take these very limited sources as written and read and highly accurate. So they're written from the point of view of the writer, as all history is. However, it's even more so in the ancient world. And it's written with very specific audiences in mind. It's written from the point of view of and for the victor. And that's very much the case with most Roman authors as well, whether they're writing Latin or Greek. So that set aside, that's what we have to do. That's what we've got to go on, in addition to archaeology and in addition to analogy and where it's appropriate, anecdote. But effectively, that's what we've got. So let's work with it, shall we, Simon? So there's Polybius. So the original history of this conflict and this battle was written by Polybius, but it's now lost. But it's been picked up by other classical authors. Polybius himself may have got some first-hand witnesses, so his account may be fairly accurate. And remember, he's an apologist for the Greek failure in the conflicts of his own people against the Romans, sort of through to 146 BC. So actually, he's about as accurate as you're going to get, probably. But again, there's still the health warning. So this gets writ into Livy. So this is the best primary source, in my opinion. It's great for war gamers. It's great for people who are OCD, like a lot of war gamers, because it's got lots of numbers in it. It tells you all about how many troops were in the battle. It gives you some odd descriptions of where they were placed, which we'll pick up later. But crucially, it picks up one thing, which nobody else does. And that's that the elephants, which were used by Antiochus in a rather odd way, which we'll pick up later, they were deployed in between the taxis of the phalanx. So you have a taxis, you have two elephants, taxis, two elephants, and so on. Very odd. We'll pick that up later. And then you have Appian, and principally that's it. And they both more or less reflect each other. In terms of modern sources, we have some great ones to use. So one of my always fallback books for anything in the Hellenistic world is this great book, Alexander to Actium by Peter Green, 1986. So this is Green 86, which I love. And that's basically all the background you'll need to the wider socio-economic and political context of the conflict. Then we have the pretty picture books by great historians like Nick Secunda. So here's Seleucid army is great. So I have side chariots in my army. They're on the table. You'll see them later. Let me tell you, by the way, they're useless. This book is more about the army of Antiochus IV, but it's still a great resource, and it has fantastic pictures for us. Look at those, fantastic. Then we have one of our own, for Sabin, wargamer, professor of military history at the Department of War Studies until recently at KCL, leading member of the Society of Ancients. This is a great book, especially for wargamers. Lost Battles, because what Phil does, and there we go, and I bet loads of us have got them as well, because we all look for Sabin, is he tries to recreate battles of ancient history in war games form. So it's effectively written for most of the people watching. It's a great book. One of my fallbacks is always still Duncan Head, 1982. I know it's a long time ago, but it's still got everything you need to know on the Macedonian Punic Wars. It's almost like a Wikipedia, but in a 1982 context. It's basically got everything you want as the starting point, which you can lead out from that point. Finally, not finally, there's one more after this. This is the key book. It's got no picture on the front, so I'll show you the side. The Seleucid Army by Bar Kopfer. Now, this is 1976. This is almost 50 years old, but it is by far still the best book if you want to get a modernish take on the battle itself. He's very good at analysing all the primary sources, putting in the pros and cons, putting it through the filter of historical perspective, and coming up with solutions. And a lot of those we both use, Simon. Finally, I'm going to be reading a section of this as a treat for everybody, a preview of a book, one of my next books coming out. This is called Romans at War, which is out in September through Casemate UK. And the last chapter is about the armies and enemies of the Romans. And the book is about the Romans from the pre-Republic through to 476 AD and the fall of the West. And the Allies and Enemies section, the last chapter, I have a big chunk about the Hellenistic world, where I have a really good, I think, personally, being immodest, take on the differential between the phalanx of Antiochus III. This is a man, by the way, Antiochus III, who called himself the Great in his own time. Didn't wait for other people to call it. He called himself the Great. Probably all you need to know about the man. There's a differential between his phalanx and the phalanx of the Macedonians of Alexander the Great. We'll talk about that later, and I go into detail here, and I'll read a section out for you. Very briefly, if you can pull the map up for me, please, Simon.
Yeah.
So the context for this conflict is as follows. This is a fulcrum battle, okay? This is a tipping point in the ascendancy of the Roman Republic in the Eastern Mediterranean and the retreat and the decline of the Hellenistic kingdoms in the Eastern Mediterranean. We can go all the way back to Pyrrhus of Epirus in the beginning of the 3rd century or earlier 3rd century, when you have the Pyrrhic Wars in Italy, when the Romans first come up against the Hellenistic kingdoms. That's probably the last iteration that they will come up against, the full fat Alexandrian Macedonian setup, lance arm charging cavalry, really effective phalanx, etc., beginning of the use of elephants, etc. So the Romans from that point know about the Hellenistic kingdoms, but they're occupied with the Western Mediterranean, culminating in the titanic Battle of Zama in 202 BC, when Hannibal gets hammered out of sight by Scipio Africanus, including his famous failed elephant charge. Then we move forward a very short period of time from the Second Punic War finishing to the Second Macedonian War, the Roman Macedonian War, where you have this, again, another titanic battle. This is the Battle of Cannae in 198, when Philip V finds his phalanx defeated, not because he can't fight to its front, but because it's attacked in its rear while it's fighting, defeated by the Romans. And therefore, you suddenly find there's a psychological shock building in the Hellenistic world. Hello, what's going on here? Oh dear, we need to really think about this now. We need to take these guys who we've not thought about seriously ever before, seriously. Maybe they are an existential threat after all. And this is psychologically important to this battle because it gets you into the mind of Antiochus and his advisors about how they're thinking to fight the battle. So this becomes the fulcrum battle. You go from the Second Macedonian War at Cannae, the Roman-Syrian War with Magnesia, and then finally Pydna in the Third Macedonian War when Philip V also gets defeated. If, in my opinion, Antiochus had won this battle, and I think he would have struggled, but if he had, maybe Rome would have turned its gaze back, at least for a few generations, to its own territories around Italy and in the Western Mediterranean, given the Hellenized kingdoms time to adapt to what was a new form of warfare. But in reality, in history, they lost. So this is a crucial fulcrum battle. One last point, Simon. It's a big one for us to choose. I mean, we could have gone for an easy one, which no one had ever heard of. But we decided to go for a big one because war games and historians and lovers of history not only are literate about history themselves, but have opinions. And this is a battle where everybody has an opinion. The Seleucid army is a menagerie. It's got camels, it's got side chariots, it's got elephants in armor, it's got cataphracts-clad horse and man in armor. It's a menagerie, okay? And everybody has an opinion. So we know that we're going to get some great questions later.
We do, and it's actually a bizarre setup, isn't it, as a deployment? So let's work our way towards refighting the battle in amongst all of those opinions. And Simon and I have taken a slightly different approach. But let me give a bit of background for those in terms of geography. Magnesia is in modern-day Turkey. I'm hoping that this pointer is, let's do a pointer. You should see a pointer now. So here we go. It's over there on the western side of Turkey. The battle was fought to the west of it. It's a modern-day Magnesia in there. And it was fought between two rivers. It was fought between the Hermus River and a tributary of the Hermus River called the Phrygius. And the sources talk about it being fought in an area a few kilometers wide where the main river turned north, thereby narrowing the battlefield. So it's fought on a relatively narrow battlefield. And despite Antiochus not being able to field all his troops, he's tempted into fighting the battle against the Romans in that narrower space. The Romans, in fact, work him backwards a little bit and actually move their camp from their main built camp to a sort of more temporary camp as the image on the right is just me hunting around a Google Maps because I'm always interested now with the technology to take a look around. So Magnesia is over on this side, it's the very edge of it there, and these are the two rivers, and you can sort of see what sort of area it might be between the two. There's a northern bit going there, there's a northern bit going there, there's a couple of possibilities. I may be wrong on both, but it's actually quite easy to see that this is going to be bounded by two rivers with a lot of agricultural and plain land in between. So this is a sort of battlefield we're actually going to be working on. And the build-up to the battle actually is quite fascinating in that if you look at the situation, those famous advisors I referred to earlier, they all vanished. So, after relying on some advisors, Scipio Cornelius' brother, he was ill and couldn't assist his brother. That's all a bit tricky. And Hannibal Barca actually was missing entirely. He suffered a defeat at a naval battle just beforehand. Probably didn't want to come back for fear of there being a defeat, and he didn't really want to be captured by Rome. He feared being captured by Rome, so he fled to Crete. So there we go. So for those of you who already play Meg, that's a snivelling little coward test on Hannibal for deserting the army.
Where he's having a drink.
Those famous advisors vanished and disappeared. Lucius Cornelius Scipio was not really an expert commander by repute, and without his brother there, was probably relatively weak as a commander. And there was a consul, a more experienced consul with the Roman army called Gnaeus Domitius, and Domitius was more expert and seems to have taken the lead. So in my battle, I've actually made Domitius the army commander and set him up so that if he can afford to gift a card to Scipio, Scipio can actually move all of his troops. Quite an interesting way of setting the battle up. In terms of format and layout, very simplistically, this is what we've got as the deployment. We've got the two rivers bounding the edges. On the Roman side, we've got the Pergamines on their right flank over here, fronted by some skirmishers. There are quite a lot of skirmishers at the battle. This is Eumenes, Pergamene. There were two Latin legions, lower quality legions, which we've graded average in my battle. I think Simon might have graded one of them poor. I put one under Emilius and one under Metius on the flank there. And then the Roman legions, which were stronger, under Scipio in the centre, and a full screen of V-lights in front of them. The army of Antiochus, we've got as having quite a big screen of skirmishers as well in front of them. And on their left flank, it's a cavalry flank led by the Scythe chariot. So this has got the chaos of the Scythe chariots here. On the other flank is Antiochus himself with the heavy cavalry wing, the strongest wing. And then we come back to this interesting deployment that Simon talked about, where they put large blocks of phalanx, actually 32 deep, I think, double the typical depth of a Macedonian phalanx. They put two of those with elephants in between. So it went phalanx, elephant, phalanx, elephant, phalanx, elephant. And if we listen to the sources, very few elephants, actually, just 2 elephants in each, and actually some elephants in reserve, actually. So we have this interesting combination that's very unusual of phalanx, elephant that we need to replicate. And we're doing it in 2 different ways for the 2 different battles. It's fair to say that in the massive numbers, Antiochus had an awful lot of other troops probably, but they were probably very poor quality Eastern levy types who would probably be no use against the Roman army. I don't know if you talk about that, Simon. So we could probably put another big blue box behind here. But one of the reasons Antiochus might, in fact, have been happy to fight on a narrow space after all is that the massive troops he had in addition to this front line were probably not worth a great deal against the Roman army. And actually, the Roman army had quite a bit of contempt at this stage for all sorts of Persian-y type weakish troops. So it probably wouldn't have done him very much good, even if it was wider from that point of view.
I think Simon used a really interesting word there, actually. It's the word contempt. It's very rare in conflict do you find an opponent has contempt for another opponent, because, of course, we're talking about killing people, and you can be one of the people killed, whether you're a commander or a frontline phalangite or a legionary. So very rarely do you have contempt for your opponents. But looking at the setup there earlier and now, to me, it seems to me that the Romans here had contempt for their opponents here, because they were willing. I mean, basically, they got their backs to a river. They chose to have their backs to a river and the flanks covered by rivers. So they knew if they broke, they got nowhere to go, and they'd all die. So there's a degree of contempt there. And I'll throw in 2 quick things as well, if I may, Simon. One, if I might talk about the elephants now, it's a good time, I think, to mention the way that we're differentially doing the elephants. And then when I've spoken about the Acne Persian army afterwards, you talk about your elephants. Richard Jeffrey Cook, our list master, who hopefully is on, came up with a really clever way of replicating this very odd formation that the Seleucids use, where they have a taxa of pike followed by 2. Livy's very specific, 2 elephants. That's not many. I mean, the elephant corps that the Seleucids had got was about 300. So this 10 taxa, 20 elephants. Taxa 2. That's a tiny number of elephants if you take Livy at face value. So that seems to be psychological warfare for me almost. Unusual because obviously, as Antiochus should have known, the elephants of Hannibal had failed at Zama, but there you go. Now, Richard's idea is clever. If we go for our 2 wide, 2 base wide, 2 frontage, unit of 2 elephants, then, which is what we have to do with the rules as they stand, if those elephants die, which they can do quite quickly actually, it's all on the dice rolls, then that's a massive gap in the Seleucid line, which is rapidly exploited by the Romans. Which is not really what happened in the battles. It's a battle of flanks and then the phalanx being flanked. So Richard's idea is to go for our usual 8 tug of pikemen, but we add an extra element, and the element is a base. It's an elephant. Sorry, 8 pikemen and an elephant. So you have a tug of 8 pikes and an elephant. So it's a tug of 9. It's really clever. And the rules we've thrown in there again, Richard's idea, are this: the elephant's good on impact because it can give the shatter bonus to the pikes either side. But if it dies, there's an instant, immediate killer base test. Remember, that's bumped up because it's an elephant on the pike block. And when I've been refighting the battle, Simon, what I've found is it either works spectacularly or fails spectacularly. So it's very historically accurate, and it's also great fun. So that's why I've done that. Finally, I'll talk about quickly the numbers. Livy talks about 50,000 men in the Seleucid army and 30,000 in the Roman army. The Roman army sounds right. You've got 4 legions, 20,000 odd men. You've got the king of the Pergamines with Eumenes with, part of his royal army effectively. So that's 30,000 sounds right. You'll probably find, I think, that a Hellenistic main force battlefield army, whether it's Macedon, whether it's Ptolemaic, Seleucids, probably 20 or 30,000. So the extra troops to me are the equivalent of the much earlier later Achaemenid Persian levy, which are effectively useless, unless it's something like a siege in the distant corners of your empire. But on a proper battlefield against the full opponent, they're useless. So if they're there, they're at the back, well out of the way. Final point, Simon, and then you can talk about your elephants. The reason I think why Antiochus knew he'd got to fight and he couldn't put it off any longer is he knew that he was going to lose face and probably half his army would leave the field. Over to you.
No, I agree with that. I mean, my read of it, I was putting it together, is very similar in terms of the chaos of the elephants. I'm playing the game in 6mm scale. Somebody asked me if I would do a Pacto game in 6mm scale, so these are rather tiny by comparison. But what I've done is set up the files of pikes here and here with elephants in between. So I've got 2 blocks of pike with an elephant base in between. It will play out as a similar sort of effect. If the elephant goes down here, it will cause trouble to both the units, the tugs next to them here. Probably one of my theses that I'll throw in at this point, and we're going to actually test that out, is that the interesting deployment and the attack plan, because if I go back to what he did, essentially what happened is in the battle is he attacked on both flanks. This flank led by Scythe chariots and this one being his heavy cavalry. And this one was quite successful. This one broke through and did a lot of damage. Is that the phalanx of this era was probably not anywhere near as strong as the phalanx of that earlier Macedonian era. They were probably nervous from having lost against the Romans already with phalanxes. He didn't have Hannibal with him, and he was probably nervous of what happened to Hannibal's 80 elephants, I think, at Zama, when they had the big elephant charge that failed miserably ultimately against the Romans. So my read of the situation is to say, well, we don't have the detail of what was going on, but try and put yourself in the mind of the person at the time and the decisions they made. And my thinking is that probably in game terms, this phalanx isn't as strong as the historical Macedonian one. It should be graded less good, should not be drilled average, should probably on average be something like formed and possibly combat shy in the. And if you feel that and you're worried about the elephants, the idea of deploying this really unusual thing as a sort of defensive version to try and annoy the Romans in something unusual rather than leading with it in a classic sort of phalanx attack form, then sort of makes a bit of sense, as does possibly throwing the Sky's chariots round on the other side to buy time, and then relying heavily on winning on his own flank with a massive high-quality cavalry. Possibly this is what's going on in his mind. It's obviously speculative, but if I put myself in the mind of somebody in that situation, I think to myself, well, they're not stupid. Why would they do it the way they did it? Because it's an extremely bizarre setup. So possibly, in my mind, that's the reason. So in my game, what I've done actually is I've set up 2 games. I played a game earlier today that I'm going to share with you, where I classified all of the phalanx as average and drilled, so a more classical version of the phalanx, but played it with historical moves. And I'm going to replay one, which I've just started here, where I've downgraded the phalanx, but I'm going to attempt to lead with it and play it more as a natural phalanx attack type of battle. So it's quite tricky. And actually adding the phalanx to it as well makes it very difficult to attack. They're not the sort of things that maneuver very well together. So it's a relatively defensive setup. It will be quite difficult to coordinate going forward. And we reflect that in the rules because you've got a tribal elephant in between drilled phalanx in my first game, but that makes the block tribal. So it downgrades the phalanx to being able to maneuver no better than an elephant. So it's quite an interesting setup, actually, in both the games that we've got, Simon.
Can I talk about the phalanx there briefly as well, Simon, before we move on?
Please do, yeah. Yeah.
So if you look at the numbers in the phalanx that Alexander the Great sort of invaded the Achaemenid Persian Empire with, he's looking at about 24,000 phalangites, right? So let's jump forward to Philip V at Kylosophile. He's only got 16,000 phalangites plus 2,000 quote-unquote peltastoi who could have been phalangites or not. Tops, he's got 18,000. So it's gone down. It's gone down. This is the Royal Macedonian Army, remember? Yeah. Then if you look at the phalanx and by the way, let's remember to do that, Philip V had to force 16-year-olds and had to force old men to actually join the phalanx. If you want to get a really good historical fiction take on that, my friend Ben Kane has written 2 great historical fiction novels in the last 4 years about the Kynosophile campaign from the Roman and the Macedonian perspective. And he goes into great detail about how that had an impact on Macedonian society, actually. You're stripping out the kids and the old men to actually fight. So the phalanx should have been smaller than 16,000. Let's bump forward to Perseus in the Pindar campaign in the 160s. He had a phalanx of around 20,000, so it's slightly bigger. But remember, his phalanx was only able to do that because he had this enforced breeding program in Macedonian society to encourage people to have more kids. So there's clearly an issue. And to my mind, the issue is a dilution from the time of Alexander through to our period, going through to the final decline of the Hellenistic kingdoms. Let's call that the sack of Corinth in 146 BC. Gradual dilution of this vast geography of the Hellenistic world, where dots and dots of phalangites have been left all over the shop, big dots in Babylon and Macedonia, with the Royal Army in there in both, but dots everywhere. Gradually, they decline in quality unless they're part of the core Royal Armies, and even then they're struggling to recruit the phalangites in. So the phalangites are fewer in number and they are less capable. And bear in mind, let's all think about the images in colonies, Greece and Rome at war. War is a book on the classical world. The phalangites that we're presented with there later look better. They've got longer pikes, some are wearing chain mail. But what history tells us is, in actual fact, they're poorer.
Yeah. So we shall test that theory out in a minute. That'll be one thing you can do with the rules, and one thing I love about refighting battles is playing out the what-ifs that you can do by doing so. So, for those who don't know anything about the battle much, this is what happened in the actual battle in very headline terms. Antiochus attacked on both flanks. On this flank, the scythe chariots were actually broken by missile fire from all of the skirmishers and ended up hurtling backwards and went through the cavalry here, weakening them considerably. And I'll show you a bit of that in my first game, actually, because it actually did happen. And Antiochus attacked here with all the heavy cavalry and actually broke the Latin legion on this side and crashed through it. And the situation then had Antiochus' victorious wing attempting to sack the Roman camp. Meanwhile, Eumenes manages to break the left flank here because of the chaos caused by the scythe chariots. And the Velites came forward and actually seems to have got rid of the screen of skirmishers because the phalanx thereafter became quite exposed to Roman missile fire. And actually, according to the sources, what they did in that situation is they managed to form square. So they were obviously quite capable of some reasonable maneuver with the 2 elephants inside. So rather like Wellington at Quatre Bras with the British infantry, but this time with 2 elephants inside instead of a Wellington. So each of those were formed up in that form. But gradually, what happened is the missile fire from the Romans was focused on the elephants within, and the lack of a support caused the elephants to cause chaos, to rout, to break the phalanx apart, at which point the Roman legions were in their element, could break in and actually defeat them with relative ease. And at the same time, and probably even more decisively, Eumenes had made it onto the flank and started crushing them on the flank. So this combination of elephants breaking them up and Eumenes hitting the flank was too much for it, and most of the phalanx ended up surrendering. Antiochus with his heavy cavalry wing, meanwhile, was too slow to get back to influence the rest of the battle. So it's quite an interesting take on the as a battle to see how it plays out. I'm just going to share with you the first battle that I played, and then I'm going to hand over to Simon, and he can actually take you through a bit of what's going on in his Maximus game. So,
Simon, do you want to take me off screen? And then I'll set my camera up.
Well, you take yourself off screen by just turning off your camera and voice. So,
okay. Do you want to put my image larger, please, so I can access it?
I can go like this, and then you can. I think you can disconnect yourself for a little bit. That's the one. Okay, so let me see what I can do for you. So this is game 1, played in Pacto. So again, anybody who doesn't know the game, in the compendium we have 3 versions of Mortem et Gloriam. We have the big version, which is played with about 80 bases aside, 70 bases aside on a 6x4 50mm, bigger if it's 28mm. I mean, down here we actually play double Maximus and triple Maximus with 6 players aside, so you can play very big games with this. There's a middle size, which is really designed for 28mm games played on a 6x4, and there's this game called Pacto, which shrinks every one of the units, tugs and sugs as we call them. You can go into that if you get the rule book for the reason for the nomenclature, but shrinks them down to files. And you play this on a 3x2 with 15mm or 6mm. So these are my 6mm figures, and these are all being used on a 3x2 table. Here are the 2 rivers. There's a bit of terrain on the flanks here. There's 2 camps. We have a Seleucid camp and a Roman camp. And this is the original setup. Every one of these is a legion. So that's a legion in Pacto. It's got 2 tugs, 2 units of Hastati Principes, a Triarii at the rear, and a cavalry unit. And it would have some V-lights at the front as well, but the V-lights have been clustered in the center. We have another legion there, a veteran one there, a veteran one there, another Latin one there. And we have Eumenes with Therophoroi skirmishers and Xistophroi cavalry here on this flank. 2 little tweaks to the Roman deployment. All the V-lights are pulled to the center, so they have the legions, the V-lights of the Latin legions thrown together as well. And the Triarii, who are the high-quality ones from the rear of the Roman legions, are grouped together as protection for the camp and for the wing. If we take the Antiochus army, he's got 2 cavalry tugs down here, fronted by scythe chariots with some mounted skirmishers. And then there are 2 of these phalanx, elephant phalanx, phalanx, elephant phalanx with skirmishers in front. Both sides were flanked by Galatians, some Cappadocians in the line here. There's an interesting twist on this side. We put the Agrispids, the silver shields, here. Livitech literally describes them as being on the far right, which seems unlikely and more likely to mean the far right of the phalanx rather than the far right of the army. But plausibly, these could be here or could be actually here, secured against the river. But there's plenty of phalanx to go around. And then this is the heavy cavalry ring with lots of high-quality cavalry. So that battle as played, if I do the first turn, I show you the first turn. That's what happened in turn 1. So there's a big advance over here. There's the scythe chariots moving forward here. There's less happening in the actual center. And the situation is got some cavalry advancing there behind the scythe chariots. If I go to turn 2, and you can see how fast the game moves, this is the end of turn 2. So the action is about to start. What's happened now on this game is Antiochus is here. He's got 3 high-quality units of cavalry here. He's got the Agima, who are fully armored cataphract types and superior. He's got cataphracts who are average here, and he's got superior companions and himself in the center with some light cavalry on the wing. The legion here under Demetrius has held its ground, but the Triarii have turned to work out to the side to give some flank protection, and the exceptional Triarii have wheeled in on the basis they may have to protect the flank and the camp later, and these are Roman cavalry. Meanwhile, in the center, the Roman V-lights are closing to try and get rid of the enemy skirmishers, and the scythe chariots have advanced forward and are now facing a mass of skirmishers here. I'll take it on another turn, 2 turns possibly. This is 2 turns actually, so I skipped taking a photograph on one of them. But this is going very historically on the right, in that the cavalry here have managed to ride down the Latin legion in the main. but with some considerable losses. So they've broken through, hit the Triarii, lost some companions. They've lost one of the cataphracts, but this cataphract has hit the camp. The camp wasn't fully fortified, we don't believe. It was moved forward. So we've got a situation here where they've started to damage some of the camp. The whole area here is pretty much panicked and fled. The only person left is the general here with some Triarii, and there are some Triarii here keeping Antiochus and the Aegima occupied. In the middle, the Velites in this particular battle are not doing terribly well at getting rid of the skirmishers. So far they've rather failed to do that. Meanwhile, over here, the scythe chariots have got themselves in a bit of a pickle and been routed. I've got one there that's routing, and they've actually broken through their own lines. They've been routed by firepower from these, broken through their own lines, and they've caused more damage to their own troops than they did to the opposing troops. So actually, both of these flanks at this point in time are going with history quite well. They're actually causing the collapse of a panicked Latin legion on this side, and the scythe chariots are causing more trouble to the Seleucid army than they are to the Roman army. If I move on, another turn, let's see if it'll load itself up. It's taking a little while. There we go. So this is another turn on. So what's happened in this turn is they've got rid of the cataphracts fighting the camp. So the Triarii have saved the camp. That's also something that's relatively historically accurate as far as we're aware. Skirmishers are starting to disappear here, and the pikes and the Galatians are lining up for a charge. So there's a Roman legion there, the Latin legion there. These ones have managed to get rid of some of the skirmishers, and there's a close-range cavalry engagement going on here with the cavalry trying to shoot up some of the Therophoroi over on the flank here. We'll keep it rolling. Turn 7, I think this would be. So this having moved on this flank, Antiochus is continuing to win, has broken the Triarii opposite him, and has now crashed into the other unit of Triarii, but isn't managing to get back to assist in the centre yet. But the bit that's getting a bit critical is down here. The Galatian and Cappadocian charges done some damage to the Latin legion. They both lost a base from behind these two here, and the phalanx is starting to advance with a view to charging the legion here. Further on the left, where the chaos occurred, some Therophoroi are chasing the light horse away and giving space for the Xistophoroi to wheel in, and they're now threatening the flank of the Seleucid line here. So they are in charge range here. So these cavalry, who are only day high, mainly horse archer cavalry, are somehow going to have to stop these Xistophoroi, which doesn't look pretty at this stage. But if we keep it rolling, as the game evolves, in 2 more turns, it's all over. If we look at what's happening now, believe it or not, the day high archers do rather well and are managing to stop the Xistophoroi from breaking through. It's getting quite weak here. These two are still going. There's some damage been done here, but now there's conflict here as well. And these two legionary blocks have each lost a base as well. So the Romans are actually struggling in the centre, and without the Xistophoroi getting in the flank, they're starting to have some trouble. The battle is still going here. Domitius has managed to keep them quite busy. They've finally killed the Triarii and are now at the edge of the little bit of woodland here, but too far away to influence the battle. But the grand finale actually takes down the Roman army. These two here break before anything manages to break anything serious here. The elephants break in this turn, but don't take down the pikes. They actually cause a base loss on both. In Meg, if an elephant breaks, the camp test goes up 1 level. So these poor devils on this side here start to face red cab test. So it took a base off that one, actually. And I didn't take the base off that one because it was irrelevant. I added up the Roman army had broken. And at this point, the Roman army has lost enough to break, which I think from memory was 6. The Seleucid army had lost 4 tugs and lots of sugs. So it was a 15-10 in the scoring system to Antiochus. So as played with the phalanx at full power, they managed to pull this one off. I would say probably because the Velites were so unsuccessful getting rid of the enemy skirmishers, and the heroics of the day high cavalry here in stopping the Xistophoroi getting round onto the flanks. So a damn good game, actually, very, very close, and actually very historical on the 2 wings in terms of what happened. Simon.
So hopefully everybody can see my table. Welcome to Kent. in a very sunny Sunday evening. This is the Battle of Magnesia. In my battle, I've moved it on to turn number 3, so the armies are about to hit. And I've built a little bit of a conceit into my game just so you can have a bit of fun. Everything's going to hit at the same time. So those who don't know Meg very well or aren't war gamers but just want to talk about the history can just have a bit of fun and see what may or may not have happened. For those who don't know about Meg, we use a dice system here when we're fighting, and the dice is effectively blacks, not very good, whites, a little bit better, but not very good, greens, average, yellows a bit better, red, very good. So when I start rolling dice, that's going to be the thing we're looking to. And the key thing we want on the dice is one of those, which is a skull. Okay, can you see that, Simon?
No, lift it up a bit.
Can you see that?
That's better.
So you've got a skull. Okay, so I'll go through the armies for you. So on the Roman side, in my deployment, I've got the Roman cavalry. I have the 4 legions here: the Poor Legion, an average legion, a superior legion, an average legion, and 2 units of Pergamene Therophoroi. These are the Pergamene Zistophoroi, really, really good quality cavalry, charging lancers. And then here, the reserve with Lepidus, who saves the day for the Romans because he protects the camp when Antiochus breaks through. These are the Roman brigaded out Triarii. These are classic sort of Roman Camillan, Polybian, Hastatian Principes, sort of in their maniples. So we look now at the menagerie of the Seleucid army. We have here some Asiatic archers who aren't very good. We have here the line cataphracts, armored man and horse. The Agema, the guard cataphracts with Antiochus himself, armored man and horse. We have these bizarre tugs of 9 bases here, 8 phalangites and 1 elephant. They're the guard silver shields, superior, 2 of average. Then we have the Galatians, who aren't very good, just devastating chargers, and then Thracians, who are actually disadvantaged here because they're loose terrain troops, and here they're having to fight in the open. And here we have the famous side chariots. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put the camera into a hold position where you can probably see me rolling some dice as I go through the combats, and then I'll bring you back into the hover so you can see what's happened, okay? So I'm going to put you into a hold position. Can you see the whole table there, Simon?
Pretty much. Can't quite see the left bit. Just slightly further. No, other way.
There.
That'll do. Yeah.
Great. Okay, we're in business. So I'm going to go through.
I've got it sideways though. Have you got it? Do you want to spin it round? Does it help?
I can't at my end because I've got the camera on a stand, Simon. It's the same stand it was on earlier.
Oh, I wonder why it's sideways now, because it wasn't sideways the first time you did it in the test run.
That's what you're after, isn't it? Hold on a minute. Is that the one you want?
That's what I want, yeah.
Okay, hold on. Like
that? Yes, that's pretty good, actually. That's going to be great. That's good. Yeah, that's spot on. That's good.
Great, okay. I'm going to go for it. So we have in play here a charge phase. So this is effectively the beginning of the turn sequence. We go charge, shoot, move, and then fight melees. So this is the charge phase. And my conceit is everything's charging at the same time. So all the fun's here straight away. So we're going to go over the first charge here. This is the turn, by the way, the active player is the Seleucids. So the Seleucids are going to choose where the chargers are going to go first, or where you're going to fight first. But I'm going to choose to do the Zistophoroi cavalry here. They're going to charge the Pergamene with Eumenes, the king. They're going to charge the Seleucids' weak left wing with the Arab camels, which have got a bow, with the Thracians, with the Galatians. So firstly, we have 2 shots here with the camels at the Zistophoroi as I charge in. So let's see what happens. Look at that. Can you see that, everybody? 2 wounds. Cool. So the elite cavalry of the Pergamene Royal Army. This is a guard. They've lost the base. Not a good start. Not a good start for the Romans.
There you go.
So go the camel. So the camels now run away. So they're going to skirmish away. They're going to go 5 down to 3. They're on 4. So they're going to go back 3. They're okay. They've got out of the way. So the Zistophoroi go into both the Thracians and the Galatians when we start fighting. We've got 3 other shots here, which is where the Roman Velites, who did have a role in the battle, are going to shoot at the guard phalanx and the guard phalanx elephants as they go in. So I'm going to do the files separately. Velite against phalanx, the guard phalanx file is nothing. Next one. is a wound. So goodness me, the missile troops are working today, and finally the elephant, nothing. So we're going to skirmish away with the knights. They roll a 2, so they only just get through. They only just get through. Pop through the back like that. They run through the ranks, and the legions are now closing the ranks to meet the massed pikemen. 32 deep, first 5 ranks with the pikes level, with an elephant thrown in. What could go wrong? Here we have 3 forks with the bowmen on the Seleucid side firing against the Roman cavalry coming in. They rolled nothing. Oh dear. So let's move everything into contact, and then let's do some score rolling, because we like score rolling, don't we, Simon?
We do, yeah.
Simon, while I'm moving my troops, can you explain to people what happens when you get a wound or a skull on the dice?
Yeah, so there's a set of symbols. So that on the dice, if you get a skull, you fight file to file. So you roll the dice for the files fighting against each other. The better your chances in factors, the better your dice. If you get a skull, you kill an enemy base. So it's a very simple system. If you get a cross sword and arrow, it's a half kill, or what we nickname a wound for the sake of a simple term. If you get an S, you get a special effect if you're allowed to claim one. Now, they vary, and in combat, the 2 most common ones are shatter and shove. Elephants get shatter, so if they get a skull or an S, they get a shatter, and the shatter represents punching a hole straight through the enemy. If you do that, it's kind of like if you imagine rugby, it's a crunch tackle where you just bust through. What it does is it gives an extra 2 factors to everybody fighting next to you, and it can carry on and become a wave that spreads, so it can be quite disastrous. The other S that's common is a shove, which is a phalanx. Yes, it can create lots of those. It's a shove, which is actually more like a rolling maul in rugby. It's pushing the enemy back, and that's what phalanxes are very good at. If you get one of those S's or a skull with a phalanx, which has got shove as a characteristic, they give a +1 bonus to the people to either side. But their benefit is they don't do it just in charge combat. We have 2 types of combat in Meg. We have charge combat and melee combat. And that allows us to differentiate from things that are superb at first impact, the first 10 seconds, say, of a crash, and the troops that are good in an extended fight. So they are quite different. So the advantage of the shove is it applies in both first contact and in melee. So they gradually better as they're in an extended melee, whereas the shatters only occur in charge combat. So in this particular game, when Simon goes through this, the elephants have got shatters on skulls and S, which is why they're a wild card. And the pikes have got shoves on S's. And there'll be some Galatians around who are devastating charges who also have potential shatters, I would think, somewhere further down in the cavalry program.
They're about to get rode down by the thinning number of Pergamene lancers. Simon, a very exciting development, because it's Sunday evening. I'm getting forgetful, and I forgot to do the most important bowfire, which are the Cretan archers against the chariots. So I've got 3 shots. Let's see if we get a kill. So the first dice, Cretan archers, is an S, which is a waste here. Next one is a wound. Final one is nothing. The chariots get in.
So actually, in terms of the rules, that's actually a slowing effect. The S stands for slowing. So they will have slowed the chariots. Oh, okay.
Can you explain that?
That was the Cretans trying to run away. So the Cretans have fired at full effect, which means they've taken a skirmish order, which is pile as much fire on the enemy as you can and fall back. So
they're going in the dead pile.
They've fallen back to their graves because that little dice is a variable movement distance. They normally fall back. They can run away 4, or they can skirmish back 2. But that 1 on the dice takes 2 off. So actually, they stumbled over themselves trying to shoot. They did some damage, but they got ridden down in the process. So goodbye skirmish.
It's an important note to make for wargamers who aren't familiar with the set of rules. In terms of winning the game, it's only the toast, so the line of battle troops, that count. So they count as 2 points if you kill one, but a unit. But if you kill a unit of skirmishers, it doesn't count to the overall break point for the army, but it does count as 1 point if there's a less than 15-point win. So it does matter, actually. And these are Cretans, so these are some of the elite mercenaries of the ancient world. And for once, the side chariots have actually done some damage.
Yeah, you've got twice as many Cretan archers, but they're in halves.
Right, I will get stuck in. Let's get stuck in. So, is this the foil lancers? I'm going to go with Eumenes is going to go in with his lancers and fight. So the lancers are charging lancers, a factor of 2. They're hitting the Thracians who are loose foot, a factor of 3. They've got the superior, a factor of 4, and they've got Eumenes, a factor of 5. The Thracians are on a factor of 1. Oh, go on. So therefore, it's 4-1. So therefore, it's a red and a white dice for the Pergamines, who roll a kill and a wound.
Ow.
Big one, a kill and a wound. And then a black dice back at them from the Rumphier wielding Thracians, who do nothing, funny enough. And then we have the Pergamene Lancer here into the Galatians. So this is less because the Galatians aren't loose in the open. So this is a faction charging Lancer 2, superior 3. That's it, 3 to the 1 of the Galatians. So it's a yellow-white. So a yellow for, it's a cop dice, landed on a velite. Yellow is nothing. Ooh. And the white dice back to the unit that's lost 1 already is nothing. Right, let's go for the biggie. Let's go for the side chariots. Here are the side chariots. I'm going to go for a shatter in the middle. So I'm going to go for this side chariot. He's got no factors really because he's also poor. And he's not in 2 ranks, so he doesn't count as devastating charger. So he's got no factor. The Thurophoroi are long spear, 1. 2 against mounted, and they're fighting 4, so they're 3. That's a red to a white. So, but remember the S for the side chariots here, it's a characteristic, gives them an automatic kill. Okay, because that's a characteristic of expendables. So first I'll do a side chariot. Is a wound. Blimey. So they're doing something already. And the red back is a kill. Next one is going to be the Roman will go for the extreme left, so we'll go with the red against the Pergamines is a kill, so the chariots have gone. That's it. Gone. So the chariots have killed the Cretans and they've wounded one of the Thurophoroi, but they've died on the spears of the Thurophoroi. So that's done. Let's go for the big battle on here. And again, I'm going to be the Seleucid player, I'm the active player. I'm going to go with this elephant here, because this elephant here is with the guard phalanx and is next to Antiochus with the guard Gemma. So if he gets a shatter, it gives him a massive bonus either side. This is a big dice roll, yeah? So here we go. So the elephant, the elephant has a factor of 2 against foot of this type. And the legionaries always have 2 because they're impact foot. 2 versus 2. So green off, as we call it. So I'm going to do the Roman first.
Just as he rolls that, the green for an equal combat is volatile because it's the first dice with a skull on it. That's a blank for the Roman, okay?
Here's the biggie.
There's a biggie. Skull or an S causes chaos.
He's got a skull. Yes!
Double chaos, okay.
I actually want I always, as a Roman historian, I'm quite bizarre because I always want the Hellenistic kingdoms to win the battles. When I look at the Battle of Pydna, Carno, Sophia, Magnesia, I always want the Hellenistic ones to win. And they always still lose. That's a big result. So, man off, the legionary's dead.
Yeah.
Let's do the flanks either side. So I'm going to do Antiochus first. This is a big dice roll. So Antiochus is is devastating charger 1, long spear 2, superior 3, Antiochus 4, shatter 6.
Yeah. 6,
right? But the legionary is always with the impact foot 2, so that's 4-0. So it's a red-white versus a black. So Antiochus moving.
And Simon, can I just add a comment to that before you roll it? So the scatter effect of the extra +2 is very dramatic, but you see how easily Simon can do all the factors. And because you read everything off the dice, the game is very easy on the brain because you don't have to do any maths. Everything's additive. All you need to do is figure out what colour you roll. Once you figure out what colour you roll, it comes straight off. So the speed at which you can play this once you've got used to it and you know your army is very fast. The other thing that's important in it is it goes up green to white when you're advantage, yellow when you're up 2, ready for your up 3. If you can ever get up 4, which they've done here, it's fantastic because you drop the enemy down to black as well. So you suffer very little risk in the fight as well. So here we've got a red and a white net versus a black. So there's not a lot of risk on the Agema.
The blacksmithing. Here's the biggie. A wound. Just a wound. Ooh. I should say that, I should be on fire. So there's a wound there. So I'll do so when we have a shatter or a shove, the two adjacent files have to fight automatically next. So the next one we're going to fight is going to be the Gemma, RG Rasmus, the Silver Shield. So now, fight 2, superior 3, shove, shatter 5, to 2 with the impact foot with the Romans, so it's a red, white. The Romans roll nothing. The phalanx rolls a wound, so that's another man off because the 2 wins being carried. So therefore, in the impact phase, that legion has lost 2 bases out of 8 and only inflicted 1 wound. So on the basis of that, things are beginning to look at this early stage good for Antiochus. Although remember, this is the wing historically he won with, and often in May we tend to find the result can almost certainly be historical. So what I'll do is I'll work down the capitals. So here I've got the last again fire, long spear, dead charger, superior 3, fighting a legion with the impact foot 2, but the legion is poor, so it goes down to a 1. So that is a 3-1 yellow-white. So it's a yellow-white, which is nothing, and the white factor is nothing. Then it's a green-white for the average. Max 1 is a wound. And the last one, and the dice back is nothing. And the last one is nothing, and the dice back is nothing. So therefore, that's a bit of a stalemate. So let's work down the phalanx from this point. So I'm going to throw, in fact, I'm not because there's a wound on the unit, the next file of Argyraspids. So they are 2, superior 3, legions of 2, green, white. Green for the Macedonian. It's a kill. So we've got a kill there. So the phalanx is punching through. The white back is nothing. Richard Jeffrey Cook's listening. These are like your dice usually when you fight to me, Richard. Moving on to the next elephant. So the next elephant is going to be green versus green. So the Roman green is a wound, gets a wound on that unit. The elephant back gets a shatter. No kill, but a shatter. So the phalanx next to it gets the bump of 2. So it's 2 pike versus 2 legion, but the bump of 2 makes it 4-2, yellow, white. There we go. Another shove, no casualties, and the dice back is a wound actually. So in actual fact, the Romans outperformed what they were expected to do there. They killed a base in the phalanx. The next one goes to a yellow-white, a green-white to the Seleucids because of the shove. The green dice is another shove, and the white dice is another wound. Interesting. The Romans are fighting back on their right wing in the legion. The elephant. So the elephant's going to fight 2 versus 2, but the elephant gets the shove, so it's a yellow, green versus a white. The elephant, nothing. Oh dear. Nothing. The last combat here is going to be the phalanx here, 2 versus 2. Green versus green. The Seleucids roll a wound. The Romans roll nothing, so there's a wound on the Romans there. Then we'll do the cavalry coming down the hill. Cavalry are, they are short spear, 1, loose in the open, 2, yellow to a white. So yellow is a wound, the white back is nothing, the final yellow is nothing, and the white back is nothing. So that's a bit of a stalemate as well. Finally, because the side chariots broke, this is where history starts coming into my game here. Right now, it broke within cab distance, a killer base test distance of this phalanx. So one of the side chariots is running through the phalanx, creating mayhem. So we give it an immediate killer base test. We do it now to the break. So that's going to be a yellow killer base test. And it's a kill. So the side chariots have killed unit of wounded a Thorophorai, and then killed one of their own pikemen. So what I'll do now, Simon, is I'll just pull the camera into the hover just to show everybody what's happened at the end of that turn.
Perfect. And if you finish off doing that, I think what to do is if you carry on playing that after you've done that, I'll pick up and talk about my alternative Pacto game for a bit and play a bit of that, and we'll come back and see how you're getting on.
Okay. So let me I'll take you in the hover, and then I'll mute myself, okay?
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
So you can see here.
Down a bit, go a bit closer. Yeah, okay. Yes. Okay.
So here, not much happening at the moment.
No.
Here Not much happening here, but this legion is starting to wobble. It's lost 2 out of 6 in the first impact. So actually, that's where the weakness is going to be in the Roman army, actually. This legion here has lost 1 base. This legion here... Sorry?
That's better.
This legion here has just had a wound. The Thoroughphoroi aren't engaged yet. Then we have this rather odd situation. Oh, actually, yeah, we did the combat. This is a rather odd situation where these 3 remaining charging lancer guard cavalry with a Pergamene king are taking on the entirety on their own of the Seleucid left wing. So at that point, Simon, I'll love you and leave you for 10 minutes, and I'll put the video and mic on.
Fantastic. So I hope as you watch that, you can, those of you who haven't played the game, some of you who have played the game can probably comment just how quick and easy it is to get all the outcomes, because the colour dice do all the brain work for you. And it's very easy once you know your army to know when you're 1 up, 2 up, and especially when there are 2 of you playing, it's actually very easy. Part of the theory of the design was to try and get 80% of your brain power when you play Meg to be focused on how you use your command lists or cards to make the decisions as a general, and that the outcomes are as easy as possible to get to. So it takes the brain track. So a complete contrast to some of the games we used to play 40 years ago, where it's probably the other way around, and we spent 20% of the time thinking what to do and 80% wading through factors and tables and outcomes and all sorts of things to try and figure it out. So it keeps the speed up. So I'm just going to return us to Magnesia done in 6 mil. And what I'm just going to show you quickly is my alternative game. So if you remember the setup, which I'm just going to put back up, this was the setup. The setup's no different. But what I'm going to do is, instead of attacking on the 2 wings, which I did in the first game to be more historical, I'm going to actually attack more with the phalanx in this game. But I'm going to grade every single one of those phalanx as formed combat shy. So these are average. Others are silver shields, but they're still combat shy. And combat shy gives the enemy an extra factor once things are in an actual fight against them. I want to do this just to see whether that really proves their defeat, really, because if it does, and we think the Hellenistic phalanx was quite weak, it gives a rationale for Antiochus deploying this way and using his plan. This bizarre setup of Magnesia doesn't look quite so daft in that case, actually. It looks quite plausible. So I've played the first couple of turns already, so I can speed us along. So here we have the position after turn 1 in this particular game. So you'll see it looks a little different to the one I showed you earlier. This lot are held back. These are not racing forward, but the phalanx is advancing. If I take it on to turn 2, when the action already begins, here we go. That's turn 2. Now, let me do the next one. Sorry, apologies. Let me go for the next one, which is number 3. This is the end of the second turn. So the end of the second turn, the phalanx and all the skirmishers getting quite close. There's a bit of an exchange of fire. There's a wound hanging on some of the skirmishers there. These are all the V-lights. There's a few good saved cards at the back here. Whereas in the other game, we had a long line of attacking troops here who were actually fighting up here against this Latin legion and broke it earlier. These are waiting and holding back and attempting to attack with the phalanx. We've got a bit of chaos over here. The scythe chariots have got close. So I'm going to pick the game up actually at the beginning of the next turn, which is the beginning of turn 3. So again, for people who haven't played, this is another theme of Meg. It moves very quickly. So this is actually the situation that we're going to start off with, is the beginning of charge of 3, where we've got the charges. So in the charge phase, I'm going to pick it up from here. There's the scythe chariots charging here. Now, they've managed to get the Thoroughphoroi foot in the way and some Romans in the way. So they're going to hit Romans and Thoroughphoroi, and they're going to be shot at by the Cretan archers on the way in, who in turn are going to be chased away by some Tarentine cavalry. So at that point, I'm going to try and switch us over to my iPad and give you a view of the table. Let me see if it works. Bring us another presenter in. Yes, that looks promising. So, let's see. There we go. So, it's giving you a view of the table. I'm going to actually turn my camera off, and I'm going to play you a little bit of the Pacto game. Played this other way. So let me hope this works and gives you a bigger picture on the screen. So again, for those who haven't seen the game in action, it's colour driven in terms of your activations of troops as well. Generals have a set of coloured cards or discs. These are my discs that are designed to blend into these tables. So you'll see they sort of disappear to keep the game looking really nice and actually sit behind the generals. I've already paid for these charges. So first bit of the rules is shooting at charges occurs in a charge phase. So these Cretans are going to get a shot at these scythe chariots on the way in, and they are skilled shooters, which is going to give them a green dice. So I'll roll it here. Oh, right, that got rid of one of them straight away. That's rather historical. So those have actually been shot off. There they go. So they're broken by shooting during the charge phase. These chariots are going to crunch into there. And these guys, having shot and having done a skirmish, are going to go backwards. Their normal speed is 4. They've chosen to maximise their firing into a skirmish choice, so they go 2 plus or minus a variable roll. They're only going to go back 1, which basically means they are going to be there. So they're actually going to be hit by those light cavalry. So they're actually going to be 2 melees going on there. Okay. Scythe chariots here, I haven't got mine as poor, mine are average, so they've got no factors. These are average Romans on 2. So the Romans are actually 2 colours up, 2 factors up, which is a yellow against a white. We roll those, but the S for scythe means skull on an S. It's one of the specials. So the Romans did a skull, and the scythe chariots did a half kill, a wound. So there's a wound goes on that tug, and these chariots are gone as well. So as in the real battle, the scythe chariots have not lasted terribly long. And over here, we have light cavalry fighting skirmishers. The Tarentine light horse are 2 factors up for being cavalry versus foot skirmishers, but otherwise they're the same. It's a yellow against a white again. And that's a wound on each. So both of those have suffered some damage. So again, you can see the pace of it. And these would rout, and they would rout 5 away from there, which means they're not going to... that one potentially will burst through. That one, I think, won't. So there's a chance that what happened in history will happen here. If they go full distance or more, which they haven't, they've gone short and sort of disintegrated in the middle of here. So those 2 scythe chariots are gone, and that's the end of that bit of spark there. Having done the charge phase, the next phase, and this is important in the game, is shooting. So you shoot before you move. So rather than having this option of walking up and firing at things, you have to position yourself through the interactivity of the game to be in the right place to shoot next time. So we've got some shooting here. We've got 2 V-lights at very close range against these guys, which therefore get green dice. So they're good at getting rid of enemy skirmishers. So 2 greens on that file. Oh, 2 misses. Not so good. And a green each on those. I'll do them as they lie. They've done a wound on this one. So again, you can see the pace of it. It goes very, very fast. And these guys, these javelin men, can throw things at these Romans, but the Romans have a characteristic called shield cover, which is people who have large shields who are good at coordinating them, and they can apply that to take the dice down a level. So that becomes a black dice and does nothing. That's the shooting phase over, all nice and quick. We then have the movement phase where you get alternating things going on. This is turn 3, so it's actually back to the Seleucids to do something. So I am going to look over the middle because we're wanting to actually try to attack. So we are going to advance a phalanx in a minute, but we're going to bring the Galatians up first of all to be in support. So a white is advanced directly ahead. That's spent to bring the Galatians up forwards there. The Romans are wanting to get rid of the skirmishers and use their light troops, so they're more interested in pressing forward on this side where we've got some possible advantages. So they are going to do a double move with some hoplitey type Thoropheroi here. And they can do a double move as long as they stay outside 4 of heavies. They can completely ignore the skirmishers. For that, one of the things that happens in this is you don't slow people down as easily with skirmishers if you've got heavy troops in their way. So again, it alternates. It creates a sort of neo-simultaneous type of movement. Over here, they're going to advance the Galatians on this side as well, so that they're there in range and in support of the pikes. Flicking back to over here, I think we will use a white to bring the Triarii up and wheel them as well. So those are exceptional Triarii who are particularly good at holding off cavalry. So they will use a red to do that because they've got nothing low enough to wheel. They only needed a green, and it goes black, white, green, yellow, red. Unfortunately, he's got very bad command, this Demetrius, over on this side. Back over to the Seleucids here. They want to get some pikes going, so they're going to actually advance with a green. They're going to advance these pikes forward and thereby force these skirmishers back. So this is one of the key things in the rules. Heavies can't be stopped by skirmishers, only by their shooting. They can't be stopped by their actual presence, which makes sense. There's no way a few men in a loincloth would slow down a full taxis of pikes. So there we go. They've advanced those and got them out of the way. They're going to give it a go. Let's go back to the Romans. The Romans are probably willing to discard a black, which is another option you can do. We'll advance another pike block and force those back. Okay, so now we've got rid of most of those troops. We've forced them out of the way. Let's go back to the Romans. The Romans are probably wanting to bring some of these troops round. So they will bring some cavalry up, because the cavalry are going to be quite useful for taking on those Galatians potentially. So they'll wheel those cavalry around to there with a what did they have? They had a yellow. That's fine. Going back over here, we're going to bring these guys forward because they're horse archers, so they're going to go and try and pepper those advancing hoplites with a white. You can see how fast it is once you've got the hang of it. The greens there, they're not really bothered about advancing any further. They'd like the V-lights to do something. There's nothing of any use over there. These two reds are rather tasty, so he's going to keep them. So the only thing that really is left there is the whites and the greens. So actually what they're going to do is they're going to just advance the Zistopheroi, so they're next to those there, so that they're ready to do something if the Cretans don't survive. Job done. Over here, they're holding back, as I said. They're going to wait back and see what happens with the pikes. They're trying to attack in the centre in this game. So off we go. So we have a melee fight over here, and in the melee fight, the cavalry are one up. So it's green versus white. No effect. So that's going to be a sort of long, drawn-out skirmish fight, getting in the way of the main battle troops. At the end of that, you have an end of turn phase where you have the option to keep any discs for next time that you like, or you might use them to take off any hanging wounds. So a red can be used, a yellow can be used out of combat to take a wound off. That takes that one off there. This guy's got a yellow, that can take a wound off there because they're not in combat. So that's another one used up to do that. We've got a yellow here, he's in range, he's going to take one off those as well. So there's a bit of recovery work going on. This one, probably the general, is out of distance. It's 4. Yeah, he's out of range to help those out, unfortunately. And he hasn't got a good enough disc. We'll save that. So what you start doing then is you discard them, and you're back to another turn. And in the next turn, the Romans will actually become the active player. So all you're doing is stick them in the bag, including any people want to throw away. I'm going to keep a green there because one green is useful. I'm going to keep a green there. I'm going to put all these back in the bag, give them a good shuffle up, and then we're going to draw out some new tiles, some new discs. So here we go. Good shape, flick them around. So I replenish back to the level that I did before. So 2 there. I'll keep them face up so we can get a sense of what's going on. That's pretty good discs. 3 for Philippos in the middle. Here he goes. We've got a red and 2 whites. 3 for Seleucus, controlling the other pike block. Ooh, a black, 2 blacks and a green, not quite so good. A boost of 2 for Antiochus. There he goes. Yellow. 4 for Demetrius, who's acting army commander, even though in nominal terms, Lucius Cornelius Scipio would be. He's got a batch there, and he's not going to need all those. Two extra there, pair of blacks, that's not very helpful for him, so he might have a little bit of command friction, which is what you get with the colour system. 2 here, and 2 over here. There we go. And the only other thing you can do in the card phase is a professional general can actually hand off gift cards and this to others. So actually, the helper here is going to gift one over to Scipio on the side. And as they're sitting around not wanting to do much, he's going to gift one off to the side there as well. So they've given away a disc each, and that's part of the advantage of a professional command structure. Let's do some charges. Let's have a look what looks good to charge. So these guys have to charge unless we're prepared to hold them, unless they would hit cavalry, which probably they wouldn't at the moment. They would hit those. So we would have to spend something to keep them where they are. It's expensive, but we'll spend the red to hold them. So that's holding those. So looking around, that's been stopped. The Romans will spend a yellow and charge those cavalry, I think, at those Galatians, try and break a bit of the centre. So we mark them. We don't actually do them all. We mark them, and there's an easy sequence then to make things happen. In the centre here, the pikes are going to have to wait for a bit, so they're going to hold fire. But on the other side, I think the Romans, seeing a bit of a chance because they've got a few exposed pikemen, will charge with those and will charge. Let's see. Actually, would have to. Yeah, he's got friction. You see, if you had another white, you could charge all three. He'll charge the superiors against these. Let's give that a go. So those two will go in. So that's the Romans charging there and there. And I think at the moment that's the lot. So there's no shooting here, so that's easy. So they can go in. There's no need to conform. The rules work perfectly well whether you do or you don't. These guys can't run away and there's no shooting, so those cavalry are going to crunch into those. And these guys are deliberately not charging because they've got shield cover and they can't use it when they charge, so they're going to wait a little bit. So let's do a bit of a fight with these and see what happens. Cavalry here, they are fighting against loose order Galatians, so we're going to be factor 1 for that. They've got short spear, gives them another 1. The Galatians get 1 for devastating charges. So again, I know the factors very easily, and you do for your own army. It's green against white in favour of the cavalry. Absolutely nothing happened. Over here, now this is where the combat shy pikes are interesting. Average pike get factor 2. The Romans opposite them get 2 for their weapon. They get another 1 because they're superior, and they get another 1 now because of the combat shy pikes. So this is where my thinking is this will make quite a difference. So they're yellow against white at impact. Okay, a wound on each for the first one. Not devastating for the pikes. Let's try the next one along. Oh, that's more nasty. That's a skull against the pikes there. So the pikes have come off a bit worse in the centre there. Let's see. That's all the charge phase. So if you remember, it's now shooting phase. So we're going to have 2 of these shooting at these Romans with shield cover. So again, they'll put the shields up. They'll block everything. Reduces them down to blacks. Oh, did a bit of damage despite it being blacks. There we go. The horse archers here are exactly the same. These guys have got shield cover as well. Put their big hop-ons in the way. Doesn't do anything to them. And then we've got a green versus 2 whites there for the V-lights against the white stuff. That's a skull, so he's killed one of those. Got rid of one of those. And the 2 whites, nothing. So the V-lights are actually doing quite well. The V-lights in this game are quite good at getting rid of enemy skirmishes. That's the shooting phase. Let's go for the movement phase. Well, we are going to need. They're going to need some help. So we are going to pay a white to retreat these Lightfoot there. So those skirmishers are going to go a white and retire. It should have been a Roman move first. Excuse me. Let me see what we can do on the Roman side. I think. Let's have a look. Dun, dun, dun. I don't think the Romans are that bothered about that part, to be honest. The Romans are quite happy. So the Romans will go more on this side. So with the green, they will go as close as they can to the enemy cavalry. I'll do that. And I think I know what I'm doing with the next ones as well over there. Back to over here. I think these Cappadocians possibly need to advance up all these pikes. Now these pikes are going to advance, and they're going to advance into a supporting position to help against the cavalry here. And this cavalry are going to keep those, that's fine. Over on this side, I'm going to walk because we need to do some damage. I'm going to walk a block of heavy troops through the skirmishers and drop the skirmishers back. So let's do that. There we go. Now they're exposed to the V-lights, unfortunately, but it's just the way it has to be. And the blacks are no use to them, so I'm going to dump them while I'm at it just to save me time. I'm going to remain. I'm going to advance these just to bring them up and cause a bit of threat, because they might need to charge in a bit. So what the heck? They've done a good job holding back, but let's put them in a position where they might do something. There we go. And we'll do a little snap to grid with those just to make them on the same line and get rid of the black because they're not going to use it. So I'm accelerating through a bit. They're going to be a bit useless. And the last one I'm going to use is a red with these because they're going to advance up here and put themselves on the flank to help their Cretans out. So I'll do this one through and then I'll pass you back to Simon and we'll see how he's doing. It's like, let's bring back Kent from Cape Town. But we now have a melee phase with anything that's in combat. So here, again, file against file. The Romans are superior, melee expert for 2 factors plus another because the other is combat shy. Where the pikes have lost a base and are only down to 2 ranks, they've only got factor 1. So it'll be yellow against white on that one. Yeah. And despite that, the pikes do quite well. And it'll be green against white on the other one now. That's another wound. That's the rear rank of that pike block gone. Okay. And in the fight over here, these are now completely even. So this is a volatile fight here. But the pikes, this is a supporting file. It fights in support by adding a dice. So they're going to have a green dice each. It adds a dice to this file, but it depends what it is. So these are very good against cavalry. So they would be factor 3 against cavalry. So they would normally be a red. So they fight 1 less, a yellow. So they've added a yellow, nicknamed the Brazilian by some people. So they're going to roll those 2. So it's actually the cavalry that have helped out there and done a wound. And a green for these, who did a wound on the Galatian infantry. And then all we've got left is this fight of the light troops here, which is green against white for the mounted against the skirmishers. But again, these spears would be very good against these cavalry. They're factor 2 and another 2 for them being light troops, for being skirmishers. They would normally be 4 up. So that would be a red and a white, so it drops down to a red. So this is a brilliant example of the overlap system here. It's not like when I used to play DBM, for instance, if you stick a Scilly on the edge of a line of the 10th Legion, they make a big difference. Here, if you stick a Scilly as an overlap against a difficult fight, it'll do absolutely nothing, because it will be on a black and it goes down to nothing. Whereas if you have something good on the flank, it actually creates a very high quality overlap. So here, it's a rare situation. It's a white normal dice and a red overlap, which did absolutely nothing. Look at that. There we go. And in fact, the Cretans have died. There we go. We've got rid of the Cretans for all of that. And now I'm going to do the last bit of the turn. It's the end of the fighting phase. You can also do break-offs. So these cavalry are going to pay a yellow to break off because they're damaged. They're going to get away from that fight. They're going to sit back. And this is also how in Meg you do repeated charges, such as at Hastings with a whole swarm of knights riding in and going backwards. And they've opened it up for the Galatians and the pikes to end up charging the Romans. And then we do the same thing with any good cards to take any damage off. So they're going to take some damage off there. There's nothing to be taken off here. These guys are still out of range to take any damage off there, so they can't help. He's in range. The cavalry are actually with him, so he can't do that. It's not his command. And that's the end of the turn. And I think I'll leave it at that for a second, and I'll let you go back to Dr. Elliott and see how he's doing in the big game. But already, I am feeling that the thesis is right, that if these pike are weaker, as we imagine they are, then the idea of having them in a defensive formation with the elephants isn't actually quite so stupid as it first appears, because you really don't want to attack the Romans with these. We're losing in the middle. This does not look good. And if these go down, these elephants are quite vulnerable. So the whole thing is relatively vulnerable to a breakthrough in the centre. Probably why he attacked on this side, because he could do more damage on this side. This side over here has basically gone as per history, really, with the side chariots not doing anything or doing more damage to their own side than they did to the enemy. Hope that's making some sense. I know it's a little hard to see from up there, but I will flip back. I shall come briefly. Hope you're enjoying the 6mm stuff. The 6mm stuff's quite interesting in Pacto. It makes for a really nice game on a relatively small board.
Looks very good, Simon.
Hello, Simon. Do you want to talk back on how your game's been progressing while we've been away? Is it all over?
Guess what? I've gone through an accelerating turn sequence. So if I turn the camera around, can you see? Is that the way up for you?
Oh, it doesn't look to be a lot left there. My goodness.
Yeah. So basically, I've condensed about an hour and a half into 10 minutes, or been selective about what's won and what's not won, because I want to come down to a real bit of fun to finish the game, actually, so you can explain.
That pile of bodies. Okay.
So crucially, what you've had here is the Romans have broken through on the Seleucids have broken through on the right wing. The line cavalry have been held by the Triarii, which are just holding on. The Roman cavalry, though, got round the back of the silver shields and have got them on the point of breaking them. Okay, so basically, a situation here where the game could now go either way, and it could go either way based on what happens here, because you have here the Agema down to 2, but having broken through, hit the camp of the Romans and have already at impact caused 3 wounds. So there are half a wound off breaking. Simon, can you explain what happens when a camp breaks?
Yeah, so a camp breaks on 4 wounds, we usually treat it as a diorama. If a camp breaks and is sacked, what happens is you get a cab test on every single unit in the enemy army, every tug, every sug. So if an army's already quite vulnerable, because it's taken quite a hiding already, and as you can probably see, if you haven't played, this is quite a brutal game. Nobody gets out unscathed as a common strapline that was used in the early days. You can see that in Simon's table. He's gone for blood red. Yes, that's all very dramatic. So if that camp goes, a test on every single Roman unit could be rather deadly, actually, at this point in the game. So it's important it doesn't break, but it only needs 1 wound to break. So it looks to me like it's odds on to break when we get to the melee phase.
And one of the reasons why the rules are so good, Simon, is because one of the reasons why the rules are so good, Simon, is because it encourages aggressive play, and therefore you never get a game very rarely when one of the players sits in a corner and does nothing, and so it becomes a boring game. It's a really active game, especially when the activation is unit, not me spend 30 minutes moving, you twiddle your thumbs and so on. So it's a genuinely fun set of rules, and it's going to be really fun now because we're going to see what's going to happen. There's an added element of jeopardy though, Simon. Look at the Agema. Can you see what the jeopardy is there?
Was that a 6 at the beginning?
That was a 4.
That was a 4. Is that a general at the back?
That's Antiochus.
Oh, that's Antiochus. Okay, so that's within a wound of breaking as well. So 1 freaky dice roll by the defenders of the camp, and they might run for it, in which it's a complete reversal of fortunes. Oh, that's very dramatic. Okay.
Antiochus, it's not staged at all, obviously. And Antiochus might die because he's the dice roll to kill the general as well. So let's do this, shall we? Let's have a bit of fun. So here we go. So Antiochus is going to fight, obviously, because this is a man who called himself the Great in his own lifetime. Can you hear me, Simon?
I can. Let's do this one nice and slowly on the factors for people, shall we?
Right, so, you read the factors out. So this one.
So that guy is going to be using a long spear for 1. He's going to be fully armored for 2. He's got Antiochus with him for 3. Superior for 4. Okay.
However, the camp
and fighting loose order infantry for 5 because they count as loose order infantry. The camp, meanwhile, I think is a superior camp, isn't it?
It is.
So it gets 1 back. So it's net. I make it 4 up on Antiochus's file. Do you tally with that?
I don't think you count the loose in the open in melee. I think it's only impact, Simon. So I think it's a red-white.
Is this a melee phase? No,
it's so here's the big dice roll, okay? Big dice roll.
Oh, they could both break.
What? Nothing.
Big. Oh, you built that up so well and got nothing. And
so the next
one will therefore be yellow against white.
That's right. Ready?
Yeah.
This is so funny.
Might last forever.
No!
All blanks?
All of them are blank.
All blanks. So the Thracians and bits and pieces that were trying to help hold the camp at the back and the Triara, they're fending them off. They're holding them at bay and allowing the battle to continue. Well, hey.
We'll do the final melees then to see if we can get a result. So we'll do the line cavalry versus the Triari. So you read the factors out, Simon. The line cavalry.
So line cavalry, is this a melee again?
Yeah, all melee.
Oh, melee. So they've got probably no factors because at this period they're probably not melee expert ones, are they? So probably no factors. And the pikes are facing forwards. Are they still in the? Are they in the rear of pikes, or is a single rank turn round to face them?
No, because it's happened. This is actually they ran out of cards. So effectively, I think these have the superior, so they have the one for the superior always.
So they're going to be 3 up. I think 2 up net on the silver shields.
2 up, yeah. So it's basically it's a yellow-white for the cavalry. Here we go. You won't believe it. Nothing.
Nothing. They're all tired. Look at that. Everybody's tired.
There's a green overlap, which is a wound. So you get the wound there. But I'll do the big one. The big one's this one, Simon. Can you see this one with the cataphracts?
I can, yeah.
No, we'll do the line cataphracts. So we have the line cataphracts are.
So they're going to be long spear for 1, fully armored for 2.
Done. Single rank of Triari average.
Single rank. It depends what you got them classified as. Are they melee expert ones or not?
No. These are the Polybian ones. So these yellow white.
They're just nothing. So it's yellow against white. Yes. So you're going to have a yellow and a green against a white and a black.
So I'll do firstly Triari.
Yeah.
A wound. So they're down to 2. They could break if the Triari survive. However, the Triari are going to have to be very lucky to survive.
They get the Brazilian rule.
Score!
Oh, that's
bad. There we go.
The Romans are through. Yeah.
That breaks the Roman army.
That's the army.
That's gone.
Victory for Antiochus on your game then. Okay.
So it's a 15-10. Absolute bloodbath.
Now, for those who haven't played again, let me explain that a bit as well. Simon said earlier it rewards aggressive play. He's gone very aggressive there. I would say it slightly differently. It rewards decisive play, and it rewards play where you're determined to win. There's no point playing to survive in Meg, and that's one of the beauties of it that makes it such fun to play. The scoring system is very simple. You gain scores for damage done up to a maximum of 10. And then you get 2 if you survive the battle, and you get 5 if you destroy the enemy army. So as a result, you will find people trying to do as much damage as they can. And if you're losing, it's better to finish the game having done more damage than it is to hold back. So you'll get quite a lot of 15-10 results, which is the maximum score you can get when you've lost your army. But 10 is still a pretty decent score. If you play for a draw in this and sit back and you do nothing to each other, which I have seen some other game systems, you score a 2-2. You get nothing for damage done. You get 2 for surviving. That's a waste of time. So as a result, when you play events at this, you find they're a lot of fun because people actually play forceful games all the time trying to do damage. And even if they're losing, they will try to do more damage to you usually. They won't spend all their time trying to survive. And that's actually reasonably sensible because you have to try and get a result out of a battle and turn it around. But that dynamic has led to an awful lot of fun in all the events we've had. And I've only seen 2 scores in the whole history of Meg. Whereas actually when we played the World Championship last year, we had 83% of games were a 15. And most of those were 15-8 or 15-10. So it's got a very straightforward, simple, quite forceful, aggressive system that encourages you all to play in a fairly dynamic head-on. Add that to the fact that you play the turn as a combined turn and you're always involved, it makes for usually a very engaging, interesting game. You very rarely sit around watching your opponent do nothing, and you very rarely sit around watching yourself get a very slow 3-hour draw. That's almost unheard of. And you don't get corner sitting because corner sitting is pointless. Rear sitting pointless. It's all pointless. You've really got to win the battle. Which, let's face it, if you're in a real army and you're facing a real enemy, you set out to win the battle because having an army in the field is extremely difficult logistically. You can't afford to have an army in the field sitting there trying to not win. It's actually extremely difficult to do that. You could do it as a rear guard and fall back and pull away, but in a real campaign, armies are held together for relatively short periods of time, especially the less professionally led ones. Trying to bring a tribal army together for a season, you read about some of the history of that, it's extremely difficult to feed it, to make provisions for it. Basically, it has to fight. In the way that Antiochus here, well, they had to fight. Otherwise, this horde of troops were going to go home because they'd have had enough. Let me just flick you back to my table. I'm not going to play a lot more on because I think I'm proving the thesis. I'm going to accelerate one phase of of putting the Romans in against them there and putting them in here in the centre and just seeing what happens in the centre. Everywhere else, I think it's going to go slowly, but with history. Humanese is going to dominate this flank in due course. But if I now take the centre with the charges, we get the one bit of exciting stuff that will be going on. We get the elephants hitting the Romans, and it will be in a saluted turn. So what I'm going to do is fight the ones that haven't fought yet. So I'm going to fight this elephant. They're factor 2 against Romans. The Romans have 2 for impact weapon, but these are superior ones, unfortunately. So the Romans are 1 better than the elephants, and this is the brittle issue with the elephants. Not so brittle, they've squashed the Romans. There we go. Like the commentator's curse. Okay, and then the other things that hit first time is there's a pike block here, and there's some Galatians. So the Romans will probably pick the pike block to avoid the risk of a shatter. They're normal Romans, so they're green against green. I'll do the large green for the phalanx. Phalanx did some damage. Actually, I'm going to re-roll that. They're combat shy, so they're actually 1 worse. Nothing there, and it's green against green for the Galatians, and they took a wound. So combined with what the cavalry did, they've lost the base. On the other side, the superior Romans against the elephants are 1 up and don't do anything. And the Agrispids here are going to be they're going to be 2 for their pikes versus 2 for their one. They're 1 down because they're against superior Romans. And that actually grind them to a halt. If we do the melee phase, the Romans over here are now 1 up against the Galatians. That's killed off the Galatians. They're gone. If we do the one against the pikes here, it will be evens because of the factors for the combat shy did nothing. This one would choose to fight against the pikes would choose to fight against it because it's less risky. The Romans are actually going to be 2 up though there. Do nothing. They're going to be 2 up there. We lose 1. And on this side, the Romans are going to be superior versus elephant. They're going to be evens against the elephant. They put a wound on the elephant. And they're going to be superior melee expert against superior pike with combat shy. They're going to be even there as well. Put a wound on the pikes. Okay. It's going to be close. Close. I think the Galatians, having broken here, have put a camp test on those. Nothing, so they run away. So they're through there. So the next phase, the problem that we've got here is the next phase. These Romans are going to turn around the flank, and these cavalry are going to come through here. So this is going to get very sweaty in the middle. On this side, they won't be able to get enough support up because the Triarii are going to get in. So if I just show you this flank one, this flank was a turning onto a flank. It's not a charge onto a flank. But when it's fought, they get +2. +4 for a charge in the flank, +2 for fighting a flank in melee. The pike factors don't count, so they were melee expert +2. The problem these guys have got in the middle is it's going to be a red dice on the flank every time. So that's going to nibble like crazy. And if we do the next one, which is going to be even because it's green against green, large for those. Yeah, that's taken 1 of those off. And no wound there. So I think I can see now with where it's going, the centre's actually going to crumble over here. And that elephant has got a good chance of crumbling as well. It only needs a wound to break. Indeed, there it goes. So that's an elephant broken. And I'll just show you how that works. You have cab tests on everything next to you. It would be a green against superiors, and it would be a yellow against the average. But because it's an elephant routing, it boosts it up 1 level. So it's going to become a red and a yellow. And that could be a bit sweaty. And re-roll that one as cocked. Not too bad. Put a wound on that one, which means this one only needs to lose a wound in the melee phase to actually break those. And they are factor 1 against factor 2, 3. Yellow for the Romans, so that will break those. So now we're going to get some chaos going on in the middle with another cab test over there, which is a yellow. Nothing. So yeah. So there's a break in the centre of the line here where the pikes and the elephants are starting to collapse. There we have it. So they could try a bit of a rescue here, but this centre is all going to die. So the whole of the centre will be gone this time before Antiochus does enough damage. That's going to be victory for Rome without playing it out. It would be very remote chance for it to be anything else. Ooh, you're supposed to like Rome, Simon. I thought you wrote books about Rome.
They are.
Or have you run out of Rome now? You're going to start writing about the Seleucid Empire next.
Well, my next book. Well, thanks for giving the opportunity, Simon. My next book's out on the 20th of May next week. Old Testament warriors, 9,000 BC to 500 BC. So, thanks, mate.
We'll have to do a battle from that in a few goes. I'm just going to pop something I referred to in our early presentation because it was part of the reason for playing the games this way, which is this. And I'm going to go to the very end of it. I just posed a few thoughts. And Simon and I have been kicking them around quite a bit. And lots of people here have got opinions on it. But I've got a lot to work on in terms of the data from history. If you're trying to figure out why something happened, putting yourself in the position of the commander and thinking what circumstances will make you do this weird thing that he did is quite a good way of approaching it. So my feeling is that Antiochus did have a fear of the Romans from past defeats for the phalanx. He had a weakness of the phalanx, and probably having them all combat shy and formed is quite realistic. They aren't as good as the Macedonian ones of the earlier era that would have been quite threatening. The volume of his army behind is a rabble that probably isn't any good, so a wider space isn't much use to him. Forget the advisor a bit. I don't think we need that very much. So my sense of what happened in this battle is, bizarre though it looks as a deployment, Antiochus perhaps wasn't being stupid at all. Perhaps what he was doing is creating a defensive, very odd-looking setup to try and confuse the Romans and stop them fighting a box-standard fight of destroying the elephants that they did at Zama, or destroying the pikes as they did at the earlier battles. Use it defensively, keep it well back, screen it with lots of skirmishers, and bet the entire battle on being able to win on the right flank. And actually on the left flank, use the scythe chariots, which historically were not that effective, as a slowing down tactic to try and cause some chaos. But unfortunately, that bit backfired for him because the chaos ended up being caused to himself when they routed back through their own cavalry and caused a mess. So possibly his plan was to buy time on the left, to buy time in the middle, and to win the battle on the right. But the clock didn't work for him on the left because the scythe chariots backfired on him. And he somehow didn't manage to contain the troops enough to stop attacking the Roman camp in time to reappear. But perhaps that extremely bizarre deployment and the fighting of the Romans on a narrow frontage when he's got a bigger army, actually quite possibly was very sensible. And my games here as a little reenactment are telling me that if I play these pikes as average pikes with the elephants intermingled, I've got a pretty good chance of winning the game, which is what happened in game one, and Antiochus won 15-10. But the minute I weaken the pikes and try to lead with them, the odds of me winning this game are pretty low. And actually, Antiochus is pretty much doomed to defeat. So I would say the odds are probably 90-10 in favour of the Romans in my second game, and they're probably only 60-40 to advantage the Romans in the first one. And if the chariots don't do something silly and cause chaos, probably a 50-50 battle. So Antiochus's plan was pretty good. Maybe naming himself great was a bit much, but he probably wasn't stupid, is my thesis. Simon, any thoughts?
I'll finish with one thought, actually. And this is thanks to my son Alex, who's also a student of military history, who just graduated with an MA in military history from Trinity St David's, and he studied command structures in classical and medieval armies. Look how they differed, and he got me thinking, actually. And when you look at this battle, there's something very interesting in terms of command structure. We've got the old and the new in play at the same time. Great analogy, Simon, is the Battle of Midway, 1942, where Nimitz is on Hawaii with all the means of commanding his fleet at hand. His intelligence resources, his communications are all around him, whereas Yamamoto's on a battleship in the fleet in the middle of the ocean, leading a charge with none of those to anywhere near the same extent. Well, the same's here, isn't it? Because you have Antiochus, the old-fashioned Hellenistic, and Alexander the Great wannabe, leading the charge on his right wing, almost winning but failing. Imagine he issues his orders, okay? He's surrounded by probably a council, taking some ideas, refusing other ideas, issues his orders. But at the point he makes that charge, he's lost control of the battlefield. He can't give orders at all. He's fighting for his life, or fighting to try and stop troops pursuing into the Roman camp, but he's not fighting a battle as a general. Whereas Scipio he's only going to fight in the front rank, as Caesar later did, if he needs to. But he fights from the rear initially, where he's got all the means of sending messages. He can see what's going. He's probably on some high ground somewhere. He can see what's going on. Remember, the Romans have chosen this battlefield, so he's got an amazing advantage in terms of command and control. He can see probably from the height he's on the weaknesses developing the Seleucid line and order attacks here and there, whereas Antiochus is defending himself with a sword. So two very different eras, really, and ultimately it's the Romans who come to dominate the Hellenistic world. This is one of the reasons.
I think that's quite interesting. In my first battle, actually, Antiochus was wounded twice. So,
Was he?
Yes, so he was survived, but he was down to 2 cards, and he was double wounded. Yeah, so the second time he lost all his discs as well. So yeah, 2 good games though, and a fascinating battle. Actually, it's one I only knew half the story of before we went through this process the last week of working it up. But actually, I'm really pleased with both the refights, and the one in Pacto in 6mm actually looks particularly fun. Actually, it works really well. So all of you out there with 15mm figures, we will put this up on the website next week. Download it and just play it, and report back your results on either Facebook or on the forum, and we'll keep it all up to date. And we'll see how many results we get for Rome and how many results we get for Antiochus as the time goes by. I think it's 3-3 now, actually. So it's actually a very even fight at the moment. So I'm going to switch us over just into question mode. We've got quite a few people out there on Facebook as well. If anybody would like to pose a question on Facebook, just type one there. I'll try to pick it up, or go ahead and type some things into the system that we're on. I'll pick them up as questions, and me and Dr. E will do our best to give our views on them and see how we get on. See if we half agree or not agree.
Did you just call me Dr. Evil?
I never thought of that. I can see it. Yes, good. That's very good. Okay, I've got one here from my friend Mark Bevis, who's a long-term friend of mine, actually from my school days. Mark and I basically started wargaming age 13 on his doorstep, playing with Erox and Ross tanks. So let me see what I can do here. I'm going to try and pick this one up. Let's see if we can go to that. I think I have to do this. So, from Mark Bevis in Burnley. Actually, if any of you buy Lurkio figures, this is the chap you have to thank for sending them out to you. He looks after it all. Were the scythe chariots historically ineffective? Mainly, yes, I think is the answer, as far as we know. There's only one example that I knew of, and I think Simon agreed with it earlier when we had the chat, which is the Galatians doing some serious damage with them. They were probably more a terror weapon than an effective weapon. They caused some damage, but they didn't tend to do terribly much. Richard Jeffrey Cook earlier put on a note that they are known to have been used in quite a lot of smaller battles, but we have no information of those battles of how well they did, which I would argue probably, given the way history is written, means they didn't do a huge amount, because they're quite novel. So as in any situation when the news is being written, if something novel has an effect, it tends to get written up. So I would suspect the answer is, broadly speaking, no. And in the game, they're set up that they're usually down, but they do get a skull, S for skull, for expendables. So they can actually still do some damage, but they vanish quite quickly. So they're a disposable weapon that can do a bit of damage on a good day. Simon, anything to add to that?
Completely agree. I consider them a complete waste of points, and I never have them in an army if I'm playing a competition or a friendly game. And I think the rules really create their effects really well, actually, because there's a small chance they'll do some serious damage, but it's only a very small chance. To your point, Simon, clearly a psychological weapon. If you're fighting the half of Antiochus' army, which is a sort of an Asiatic levy, they'd be halfway to Sardis by now if they saw side chariots coming towards them. But yes, a battle-hardened Roman legion would laugh at them.
Yeah. I suppose see Gladiator, for example. There you go. It's not bad in that situation. Question from Steve. So, how do you deal like this in a 2-player game without seeing the colours? Oh, that's actually terribly easy. These the discs that we have are in a bag. So basically, you take the bag yourself and you draw 3 out privately. So you draw them out for yourself like this. You don't show them, and then you keep them face down. So they're designed as discs to actually blend in. So the new ones with the game are designed to go with the grass side of this mat, and then you keep them face down next to your generals. So your opponent has no idea what you have. You can quickly pick them up to see for yourself, and you only declare them as you use them. So it works perfectly well. If you play with the cards, you have the same effect. I'm going to grab the cards. Just give me a second. I have some over here. So the alternative play mechanism, because it's not a card-based game, it's a colour-based game. That's a misconception that it needs cards. The cards are just another way of doing it. You deal them out face down, and of course you'll be able to, just like poker, look at your own hand and the opponent can't see yours. And we do have some clever card holders that will keep them upright in front of you, even if you prefer playing with the cards. We don't really hold a strong view of which to prefer. I personally prefer using the cards for Pacto because I can stick them under the edge of the board, and when playing with beginners because it's easier for them to see the cards all the time. But once you've got used to playing, those of us prefer using the disc to keep the table looking beautiful. Just a comment back on the side chariots from P-Test. Absolutely right. Yes, Mithridates in the Pontic era did use them. He used scythe chariots, and indeed, no, they weren't very effective. So it's another good example of people trying them, but they didn't do a huge amount.
And neither was Mithridates.
Neither did Mithridates. No, you're quite right. He wasn't a huge success either. So there we go. Let's see what else we've got. I need to expand my board. There's a few coming in here. How do you do that? So another one for another one. This is interesting. Okay, just to pick it up in a different way. This is another more a comment from Mark, but it's interesting. Mark's more a World War II and modern player. He's my co-author in Divisions of Steel when we bring the World War II version out of this at the end of the year. Perhaps the deployment was because there were so few of them. Actually, that's not actually the case in this battle. There were actually quite a lot of elephants. Actually, we've kept some off. The Romans actually had some elephants themselves, which they held back near the camp, and they didn't actually deploy them forward because their elephants were relatively small compared to the ones in the Seleucid army. A difference between African-sourced and Indian-sourced elephants. So it would make quite a bit of sense if there was a shortage of them to have so few. And then Seleucus had a reserve of them as well. So they clearly didn't put all of their elephants in the front line if we take Livy as written up fully. So it's quite interesting and a difficult sort of situation. Leslie, I'll answer you that one. Does it go up to red and white? No, it stays at red. Red's the maximum for a cab test. So it's an easy one to get rid of, I think. Somebody clever up there will say, no, you've not written it that way, and that might be wrong. In which case, we'll go for red and white. I'm not that bothered. It's good either way. Anything else? Anything on Facebook? Anything you chaps on Facebook want to ask, or ladies? I think we've got quite a few of you on Facebook actually joining us. Probably about 30 of you. Okay, I've got a few here. Ryan Carlson, what determines the colours and the number of each colour? No, that I can interpret that a few ways, Ryan. So maybe you could expand. Do you mean the colours of the cards and how many of them are there in a set? Or do you mean of the dice when we use the dice fighting? If you could just type me a clary. Meanwhile, I'll answer both. So in the deck, whether it's the cards or the disc, you have a carefully designed set of colours. There are only 6 reds, which are the best ones for movement. There are 10 yellows. There are 14 green. There are 12 white and 8 blacks. So it's built around the middle. And if you look at the chart that we use for actually moving, for making your decisions, if you've got drill troops like the Romans here, those drill troops generally only need green cards to do most of the things they want to do, green colours. They don't need many yellows, and they don't need a red for anything. If you take tribal troops like the elephants that we're trying to deal with, they need yellows and reds to do a lot of their things. Greens are not good enough for them. So the structure of the card pack or the disc pack is designed to create that type of friction. And then you have different numbers of cards for different qualities of generals. So the worst ones have 2, then 3 for competent, 4 for talented, and 5 for a legendary general. So that gives you the combination of how there is friction in the maneuver of troops according to their training quality, which is what colour card they need to do something. And you've also the friction of poor versus good commanders, where an Alexander the Great might be a 5-card legendary army commander who can do an awful lot of stuff with that. And a Darius sitting opposite might actually be a mediocre army commander with a nice, talented Greek ally, which probably reflects that particular battle pretty well. So the command structures plus the colours does that particular bit. When it comes to the shooting and the fighting, The dice, the standard dice for shooting is a white, which is very deliberately designed. It doesn't have a skull on it, so you get slow attritional by normal shooting, and then it goes up as the target gets better and better. And it's very easy. If the target's unprotected, you'll go at 1 and end up at green. If you're a skilled shooter against an average opponent or poor, you'll go up again to a yellow. So you can escalate your way up to getting better and better dice. If you're unskilled shooters, you'll drop to a black. In the game you saw me playing here, I rolled black dice for shooting quite often because both the Romans and the Greeks from Pergamene had shield cover, which is a characteristic that represents having large shields and being able to sort of testudo yourself to protect yourself from fire. And that forces the colour back down again. The combat's slightly different. The standard one for that is green. So a head-to-head, totally even fight. If you think it's a dead even punch-up, then you're going to be green dice each, and that is volatile, and it's deliberately volatile. It's the first one that's got a skull on it, so it can go wildly wrong for you if you go into an equal fight. The minute you're viewed as better, the opponent drops to white, and your green dice, on average, does double the damage. And then as you get better, you go up to yellow, and if you get better, you go up to red. And the ultimate at the top is a double red against a black, and a double red against a black is doing, if I just think about it for a second, it's 4, 5, 6, 14. It's doing 14 times as much damage as a black dice on average. So if you get that, you're causing a lot of damage. So I did get charged in the rear with some samurai by the 10th Legion with the general once, and that was a double red against black, and I suffered 2 skills, and they were charging me with 3 files. By the end of it, I'd suffered 4 skills and 2 wounds. I'd suffered 5 bases dead out of a unit of 8 from that one charge, and my unit broke from the charge. Didn't even get to melee phase, which is a shame because they were samurai and they were going to turn around and have a sword fight with them. But there we go. It was not to be. Hope that answers that one pretty thoroughly. Anything else? Okay, that makes sense. I've got from Ryan. Well, I'm making sense on a Sunday evening at this time. That's very good going. I feel quite proud about that. What is the next battle you will do online? Well, Simon and I have agreed for fun that we're going to alternate choices. So I can tell you my next choice is we're going to fight the Battle of Cannae, however you choose to pronounce it, Cannae, with Hannibal against the Romans. So we're going to do the envelopment of the army at Cannae. Pacto plays that out particularly well because in Pacto you do pushbacks for shoves. It's very easy to do. So that helps play out the situation with the Gauls pushed out in front, and the Gauls in the Hannibal's army at that stage are formed. They're quite well trained by it. So we're doing Cannae next, and I think Simon, you fancy doing Boudica after that?
We're going to do the Battle of Watling Street, where Paulinus defeated Boudica, but we're actually going to do a piece of experimental conflict simulation because we're both going to fight the 2 leading candidate battle sites in terms of the terrain. We're going to see which one gives us the most historically accurate recreation.
Perfect. So Hannibal versus Scipio Africanus in about a month's time. We'll announce it, probably 3 or 4 weeks' time, and then 3 or 4 weeks after that, we'll do series 5, and we'll see if Boudica can survive. Let me do a few more questions come in here. So we've done that one. One here. Would you consider playing a game using the Pacto starter rounds of Creacy to give new players an idea of how to deploy and play? Yeah, actually, I'm planning to do that as a video next week, actually. So I will do exactly that for you, and you'll be able to watch that. As soon as the shop's open, I'm hoping to get another camera and do an actual top-down shot as well, which will be quite good. While we're at it, the question on 28. 28 games. Well, actually, down in the Cape here, we do nearly all 28mm games. We do 28mm Pacto as fun games between us. It plays really nicely on a 4x3. I've been refurbishing some of my old friends from the 1970s and 80s, such as my early minifigs Punic War armies for that. And I'm doing a 28mm refight of Cannae with Thailand and Hong Kong next week in 28mm. So I think we'll do that in Magna. And we play 6-a-side 28mm games on 12 or 18-foot long tables here. So we usually use a double to triple size Maximus army and 6 generals aside and play it that way, and it plays perfectly. It's really, really good. Any idea how PSC? Well, that's a difficult one for me. Any idea on how the PSC order is still hanging on for my rules? Well, as they've been working themselves to death, so hopefully they're having a breather today. They were working yesterday on a Saturday, and they've I think Will's done some like 28 days in a row to pull everything together. I believe all pre-orders were shipped by the end of last week, and I know they've started arriving in the UK. Of course, the postal system and courier system has quite a backlog. I can't speak for where you are, but here in South Africa, I've been told there's a 4-week backlog in customs here for any incoming couriers. So I won't even get the one that's sitting there for probably another 4 weeks. I'll be lucky to get hold of a copy of my own rules before August, I think. So, so it's a matter of how quickly they work their way through the postage system now. Let me do another one from Mark here. For a non-historical deployment, how would both Simons deployed the Saluter? For a non-historical deployment? That's a very good question, actually. How would I have deployed it? Well, probably if I was doing it myself, I probably still wouldn't risk sticking the elephants in amongst the pikes. I'd block some elements together and risk an elephant charge somewhere. And I would... Thank you, Sasha. That's lovely. I just had a drink brought through. And I would stick with the idea of ploughing... I'd stick the idea of ploughing in with all the heavy cavalry as Antiochus. And I would probably hold all the flimsy pikes back together a little further back still and try not to get them involved for some time. And I'd probably stick the size chariots in front of the pikes for a bit of fun, try and cause some chaos and slow things down in getting to the pikes. That would be my sort of deployment to win the battle using the rules if I was trying to do it that way. I suspect it still wouldn't work. Because elephants aren't that good against the Roman army, I'm afraid. They're too good at dealing with them. But that would be my version. Simon, your thoughts?
I'd have kept the same. I'd have had the phalanx as one unit, and I'd have had the elephants. I'd have held them back as a reserve, actually. Maybe way back near the camp, so they can actually have room to manoeuvre left or right to deal with the breakthrough. It's very interesting in this battle. We think about the fact that Antiochus spent significant time sitting down, drinking late in the evening with Hannibal. So an interesting reflection here on where the elephants would have been deployed if Hannibal had to been there is, did Antiochus listen too much to Hannibal? Because Hannibal's still obsessed maybe by trying to make his favourite, one of his favourite weapon types work, because they failed for him. Who knows? So I'd have deployed them back near the camp as a reserve, and I'd have had the phalanx as one homogeneous phalanx. And I'd have played it as a straight battle, actually. I mean, if he'd have done that, it may well have worked, because actually the elephants were the weakness, weren't they? Ultimately, when he tried to withdraw, and on the wing he fought, and Antiochus won.
Yeah, and even combat shy, the pikes would hold on for a while. Although I would say in the pace of Meg, holding them all back wouldn't work terribly well if you're running the Roman army, because you will double move like crazy to advance on them with everything you want to. So you will get across the table pretty quickly. If you looked at those pictures of the game, you could see how fast you move in one turn. So actually, it might mean the fight started in turn 5, but it would start in turn 5 still, well within the game time. So the Roman legions would still get to the phalanx and still get to the elephants and force them to actually fight. So if you're being canny on the Roman side, I suspect that it would still be tricky, and it would still come down to whether Antiochus's cavalry wing wins well enough, because that's the one place where he's got some advantage.
And if I'm Philippos with the elephants and I see what's going off with the phalanx, I'd have played the M95 manoeuvre, the Picard 95 manoeuvre, with a red card, which is turn the elephants 180 and leg it back to Sabis.
There you go. Could have done that. It's a good question here about basing, Steve. Okay, so actually the system's very adaptable in how it works. We play it with impetus-based things down here, and we play it with things based for Hail Caesar. And we play Hail Caesar a bit here in big games. We tend to do 1 Hail Caesar and 2 Meg per year in the big games. So you could actually play with anything. You don't have to rebase them as long as you're playing somebody else who's got similar armies. And the way to play it if they're individual figures is you choose to use 2 bases as a base width and play the game using that as a base width. And instead of marking wounds, you have the advantage if you just take off a figure. So you don't even have to have wound markers if you're playing with individual figures. We also play using saga figures on sabos, and they're big figures, so we make an 80mm base frontage sabo, that's all, and then we play with those, and they look beautiful in these gigantic games because the figures are fantastic, and we just put 3 cavalry and 4 infantry on the sabos. If you're playing with impetus bases, we use them as double width 2x2s, and we just put a thin marker at the back for wherever a base has been lost, in addition to everything else. So you can actually use the system with all sorts of basing systems. It just needs a tiny bit of creativity on how you do it. And actually, I've listed most of the methods on the forum. So the answer is no. You don't have to rebase them at all as long as you've got 2 armies based that way. It'll be absolutely fine. Any more for any more? I think everybody's looking forward to a bit of. Let's see another point about elements. Excellent thanks. That's good news, Steve. I'm glad you're happy about that. I think we've answered all the questions. I don't know whether we've answered them brilliantly, but we've answered them all. So I think on that basis, as it's Sunday night and we all want a break, I think I will just close by saying that's a good fight for